Hey folks, I don't even know what day it is, February 11th, 2026. It's Lunch with Mal. And I got a new camera coming today. So next Lunch with Mal, I won't have the crazy focus issue that just already started happening. It doesn't happen as much when I do my regular calls because my hands are on my keyboard and mouse the whole time, like doing things. But man, when I'm on doing stuff where I'm talking and I do that, now it's not doing it. But anyway, I hope you guys are having a fabulous week. I am. I've been working in the office almost every day this week, mostly because we can be getting deliveries coming, but I'm kind of liking it. Like I come to the office and I do work and then I go home and I'm not doing work. It helps that separation between, work and home, which I can bleed. Things can bleed through. I'm sure most of you being authors, you experience the same thing where work and home get hard and you end up working too much or not enough. It can kind of fluctuate. Hey, Barbara, how are you doing? Hey, Rebecca. So, Monique, you're always in the middle of editing videos, Monique. Well, I guess last time you just finished filming them, so you weren't in the middle of editing yet. But still, I'm glad I'm offering you the break. Um, we have a couple of topics I want to talk about today um, that sort of come to mind over the last bit. One of them is hey, it's February, and February is always a rough month in author land, and actually, it's a rough month in retail in general. Yeah, Barbara, it is easy for home and work to slither. I like slither into one another. But I talk about this a lot when I'm especially I do it a lot during November when I'm like, hey, you need to be working on marketing and advertising and building things up in November because December and early January are easy mode. So if you can go strong into easy mode, then February is going to suck less. And that's like one of the biggest reasons. If you want to have like cash flow and consistent earning, we need to like sort of like bolster ourselves against February. Because the first thing is that February is 3 days shorter than the prior 2 months. So if you're making $200 a day, that's $600 that you lose going into February just from the decrease in days. You're making thousands of dollars a day, it gets to be a pretty substantial sum. But percentage wise, it's likely to be about the same percentage. But even if you go in and you look at your numbers for February, you're going to be like, even if I take off 3 days or add 3 days of income, I'm lower than I should be. And I know, right? Barbara says suck less, I'll take it. And that's the way it is. Like February, it's hard to have a good February. Really, the goal is to make it like have good cash flow and make it suck less. But the other thing about February is that shoot, where was I going with this? I stalled out. Oh, we're in a couple of days, we're going to get hit by the January KU rate, and the January KU rate is I believe since I started tracking it in 2016, the January KU rate is always notably lower than the prior December, November rate. 2016 may not have followed that. I can't remember for sure if last year did. I'm like 99% sure that last year did as well. So you're always going to, as soon as February 15th rolls around, you're going to get that low January KU rate, and you'll be like, where the hell did all my money go? And February, come March 15th, you'll look back and be like, okay, February is a little bit better than I thought because the KU rate actually went up. The KU rate in February always goes up from January. But you got to sort of mentally prepare yourself for that. This is sort of like a natural fluctuation the business goes through. And then the other thing that happens, and it happens a little bit more in romance than other genres, is if you're running Facebook ads, the cost per click goes up in February. January is the glory days, right? January, well, this year actually took a bit longer. Usually January 1st, CPCs on ads plummet. This year it took like about another week before the CPC started to come down from their Christmas high. And then they got really low like January like 14th through 26th, and then they've started to climb again, more than usual. So I think if you're very ad heavy for your revenue, you're probably seeing that too. But it is normal that CPCs do climb in February. Um, Rebecca says, "I'm having my best month ever until Facebook ads stopped delivering for a bit on the 9th. Oh, that sucks. On the 9th of February. Um, it's a weird time for Facebook ads. Like some people got hit by the thing at the end of January when their ads stopped delivering because of the removal of those old targets. But I didn't know anyone was having problems on the 9th. Oh, did you mention that before? I don't think you would have because we haven't had a call. We've been talked since then. I'm sorry. I hope they pick back up like they were as well. After February, things do actually get better. Readers kind of come back around. I don't know what it is about February. You think it's dark and cold and everybody would just be reading all the time, but they're not. I don't know. I think they're just like wishing spring was coming, even though it's just playing with us. Depending on where you live, some places it seems like spring really has come, like the the southwest United States. The southeast United States is having the opposite of the expected weather. Up here in Canada, it's been getting above freezing every day. It's been pretty wild. But yeah, February it never behaves like you think. You have all these logical reasons for why February should be a certain way, and February is like, nah, I'm going to be worse than you expect. So I always like mentally prepare myself that February is just going to blow, and sort of just move into it with that expectation. And then we'll move in with that expectation, and then think, what can I do to make it better? So I come in with a plan, to do new things to make February better, and it doesn't it doesn't have to like be guaranteed to be bad. It's just, I guess, like it's on hard mode. Maybe that's a better way to think of it. But like Jill closed out her Kickstarter in February, and did what, $26,000, which I know, like, there's Kickstarters that definitely do a lot better than that. We're talking, new genre for her first book, all that sort of thing. We weren't expecting it to do anywhere near that well. We were thinking like 10, maybe 15. And she kicked it all up to 26,000, which was awesome. And I think, hey Dennis, I think that once the add-ons all get purchased, it'll be up over 30 for sure. So that's super freaking cool, right? To give you guys a little bit of like future-proofing thought about how the rest of the years generally goes, is that post-February, things climb. We get a nice steady climb. Ad costs stabilize, readers start to pick up again. You do see dips once we get into April and May on really nice weekends. So if really nice weather hits the weekend in the northern United States, everybody's out like enjoying the outdoors. So you'll see dips like that. So if you can almost like keep an eye on the calendar, like if you're thinking about doing a release or something like that, and you're like, it's going to be like in the next week or two, take a gander at the calendar, or just don't do your release on the weekends in spring because people are going to be outside. That's something I've learned over the years from doing this. The other thing is that once we hit Mother's Day weekend, we see a drop off. And that drop off goes. It's not super. Well, it's pronounced right at first, and then it goes into June. But there's definitely a drop off that happens Mother's Day weekend. It's not just. Pardon me. It's not just Mother's Day. It's also just like kids getting home from college. Kids starting to get out of school, graduation stuff that starts to happen. As general life upheaval goes on. So keep that in mind. That if you think about releases and sales and specials, plan them to happen before Mother's Day weekend, or like kind of skip the next 3 weeks after Mother's Day weekend, and go for a little bit later than that is my general advice. The massive snowstorm on the East Coast in late January, I could see that. Yeah. Sometimes like weather can work for you. Like if you see like a massive snowstorm rolling into like a sale and a big email promo or something like that, if you can't, like, there's paying attention to the weather is something that like we're not used to thinking about in our line of business, but it affects human behaviors, right? People do different things depending on weather. So yeah, totally something to think about. And then like whenever Heated Rivalry season 2 comes out, if you're writing anything MM or sports related, you're definitely going to want to take advantage of that. I mean, maybe not sports related in general, but at least hockey related, right? So that's just kind of like my thoughts on February. Oh, I guess like what can you do now that we're in February? It's going to be like thinking about what it's more around what can you do to boost things in March than February. What can I do now to start to attract readers, get them in, so that come March things start to pick up, because you don't get immediate results in this industry. It takes a little bit of time for readers to get through books and pick up, especially if you're in KU, or to read the book and get on to book 2 if you're not. If you're relying on that sales read through. So, really what you want to do is you want to hoover up more readers as quickly as possible, so that you can get people in the pipeline to be reading more books. So maybe you do a 99-cent sale. I don't recommend doing free sales that much these days. If you find some multi-author promos to do on BookBub, or not BookBub, on BookFunnel or Story Origin, something that's going to get more readers into the hopper, and it's not going to have an immediate effect, but it will have a knock-on effect. So that's really what I'd be thinking about doing. Or, you're like, man, my readers, I'm not going to have anything for them for a couple of months. Things are starting to drop. Just do a quick 5K short story and just send it out for free. Build up some of that, do that fan service, build up some reader love, so that next time they're making a decision about a book to read, they get an email from you. They're like, oh, I got a free book from this author, or free story from this author that long ago, and it was good. I enjoyed it. I'm going to open their next email if they've got something else coming out, because you're in their memory. So that's a great thing to do as well. So the other thing I want to talk about is actually is a thing about copyright law that I came across today. I was listening to a lawyer give a talk on copyright law and how it applies to derivative works, and I think it was interesting because it was good information to understand based on what's happening with AI and some of the lawsuits that are coming out around AI right now. And there was the decision not that long ago that, if memory serves, it was the companies lost because it was proven that they pirated authors' books. So that was like a big part of it. But there was another thing that happened recently around the show The Pit, which is about an ER in Pennsylvania somewhere, I think Philadelphia, that has Noah Wiley in it, who played I can't remember his character's name on ER. It's been so long. I want to say Dr. Green, but he wasn't Dr. Green. Anyway, he plays an ER doctor. So, of course, the estate of Michael Crichton is suing the show, because they say that, it's a derivative work, and derivative works must be licensed. And if it's not a derivative work, that doesn't have to be licensed, because you're making up your own thing. But if you're deriving something from something else, then you have to license it. And of course, that's sort of one of the fundamental arguments around AI usage as well, right? That it's deriving something from the original work. It's tricky though, right? Because we all learn from observing the world around us. So you could argue that everybody derives everything they've come up with from things they've seen. And because of that, the courts, and this is US law I'm speaking about here currently, which I think is the most applicable because it's where most of the AI companies are headquartered. The courts have a framework for determining if something is derivative or not. And the first one's kind of interesting. And I think this could be useful if you see conversations where people are saying like, oh, this story stole this idea from someone else, or look at this book, they clearly ripped off this other book because of, I don't know, they have a detective who acts a certain way and he's all grizzled and gritty and XYZ. So there's this legal thing called scenes affaire. And it's French, so it's A space FAIRE, scenes affaire. And what that means is scenes that must be filmed. The idea is that if you're writing a detective story, well, you're going to have detectives going up to people's doors and asking questions. You're writing a police procedural, you're going to have scenes of people getting cuffed and read their rights. If you're writing an ER story, you're going to have doctors dealing with triage situations as patients come into the waiting room. So those are scenes that must be filmed. And whenever courts are determining if something has been copyrighted, they are first looking at scenes affaire, and they're like, anything that is a scene that falls in that category, that is a scene that must be filmed because it's core to the genre, is immediately something they're not going to look at when they try to determine if a work has been an infringement on someone else's copyrighted material. and like the idea is that they're inevitable, they're dictated by the subject matter, is sort of a way of thinking of it. And that's a really great thing for us as authors. Sometimes you look at that and you're like, yeah, but like, I don't know, I'm the first one to ever depict something like this, or something like that. But the idea is it protects storytellers from copyright holders monopolizing basic building blocks of storytelling, which we all need. And we've seen people try to copyright basic building blocks of storytelling before. People trying to even copyright like placement of characters on book covers and that sort of thing. Or in that case, I think it was patenting it. But anyway, like you cannot do that. And one of the reasons why is that we sort of recognize that to innovate, we have to be able to stand on the shoulders of the giants that came before us. Otherwise, we never innovate, and things would just stagnate if we couldn't make up new ideas. Yeah, Dennis says, so tropes save our butts, and that's exactly right. And I believe that the law even makes use of the word tropes in some scenarios, or at least rulings have made use of the word genre tropes. Genre tropes are not copyrightable. So this could be a useful thing if you ever see people like talking about that, and saying like this author stole this idea. You can be like, that's a genre trope. You can't copyright genre tropes. It is a basic building block of telling this kind of story. It's a scene that you expect to see because that's just the way this story would have to go. These characters would do that thing. So once they sort of rule out anything that's a scene affair, they now analyze the story or show or whatever the case might be for what they call substantial similarity. And like a great example would be what would happen, like I've got a spy novel, right? And the spy drives fast cars and has gadgets. Well, you can't say that's stealing James Bond because that's just a core part of like the genre. There's going to be fast car chases, going to be high stakes things. The spy's going to have cool spy tech, because of course they're going to have cool spy tech. They're not going to Walmart and just using whatever's off the shelf. They're actually going to have some specialized industry technology, like every industry has. So you can't say that like, a car chase down a twisty mountain road is directly stealing from James Bond, because that's scene's affair. But if your spy goes into a bar and says, I'll have a martini shaken, not stirred, now you've done something that doesn't fall into that. That's not a genre trope. I mean, maybe at a certain point, if they didn't protect it, that could become a genre trope. But it doesn't have to be. Like, it's not like a key part of the story that has to be there. So that would not pass the first test. And that's the extrinsic examination that they do. Extrinsic. And they look at plot, themes, dialogue, characters, and they determine, are any of these things like not really intrinsic to the story? And then they'll rule out anything that doesn't match that criteria. And then after that, they do an intrinsic examination. This is actually typically done by a jury. And they'll determine, like, would a reasonable audience, given this subset of things that made it through the filter, would a reasonable audience assume that this subset of things is substantially similar to another thing? And that's actually, so that's one of the problems with copyright claims against AI. At first, it appeared that AI didn't do that last part, unless, of course, the prompter told it to. Like, it wasn't inherently going to pull in stuff that would pass all the way through this filter in such a way that it was obvious. But it's been shown in some cases that the AI actually can regurgitate the original text that it was trained on for certain things. And that definitely makes its way all the way through this sieve and comes out the other end. And that's where a lot of the AI companies are getting in trouble as well, that they're storing a lot more of the original content than we thought. And so, like, the sort of the initial argument was that, and I made this argument myself, was that AI, sorry, Jill just sent me a message. I was curious if it was connected to this. The original argument was that AI learns like we do, right? Like, we see things and we build stuff on it, but we don't remember it perfectly. And therefore, we don't reproduce it perfectly. We always have our own twist on it, just to the nature of our own bad memory. And the fact that we have like other ideas and stuff like that. And AI doesn't actually have, it doesn't have will. It doesn't have agency. And that's like the most critical thing about AI, I think, that people can forget, because AI is made to appear as though it has agency. It will talk to you as though it has agency, but it has no agency. Given no prompting, the AI doesn't do anything, right? And when you prompt it to do something, you might have given it additional some instructions to follow. Like it's going to, like, in this conversation, I'm always acting as an editor, or I'm always acting as a marketer, or something like that. Like, you've given it some sort of prompt. So you give it a prompt, and you gave it instructions about how it's going to operate. Behind the scenes, it's got a metric crunkload of prompting, telling it how to behave, how to operate, guardrails, and stuff like that. And absent of all of those things, the AI does nothing. It has no agency. But like I said, it's prompting, its guardrails and structure tell it to act as though it has agency. So sort of in its native form, you can't blame the AI for the output, because the output is always put in there by a human. So like, if I said, like, to Midjourney, like, draw me a picture of Mickey Mouse, you can't say that that's the AI's fault, because that was me that did it. I'm the user that did it. And interestingly, there's nothing wrong with Midjourney doing that, because I too can draw a picture of Mickey Mouse and have it sitting on my desk, and there's absolutely nothing that Disney can do about that. I'm fully within my rights to do something like that. And so the question then becomes, like, does Midjourney's doing this commercially? They can't commercially distribute a copy of Mickey Mouse. And so the way they've worked around that, and this is something that the industry does a lot. Midjourney is like, we're not selling people images, we're selling people time on a server, and they're the one doing the thing with their time on the server. It's like, if you lease an apartment from a landlord, and you set up a studio and you draw copyrighted things and sell them, well, it's not the apartment landlord's response. The landlord is not going to end up having to deal with that. And of course, that doesn't work universally. There are certain scenarios where property owners can get in trouble for things that happen on their property, but there's lots of scenarios where they don't. But it is definitely becoming interesting how copyright is going to work in the future, with this idea, when this sort of level of analysis becomes applied more and more. And currently, from what I can tell, no AI stuff has made it through this filter. But that doesn't mean that, like, laws couldn't come in place to, like, make it so that AI stuff is just illegal anyway. And I'm actually not anti-AI in general. It's really weird to live through this time that we're kind of starting to get into now, because when I started writing my science fiction books, I'm like, fuck, the initial years of human AI integrations, and like how we work together and deal with creating with our created becoming better at doing things than us at large, is going to be awful, right? Like, I knew that. And so when I started writing my books, I'm skipping past that. When we figured out all the hard stuff, and we generally accepted the fact that we have to live with our creation. We've made this creation, and at a certain point, it does get agency, it does gain sentience, and therefore has its own will. And we have to sort of learn to live with it. And my books are actually all about humanity learning to live with being the creator who's created is more powerful than it. And it's sort of actually one of the ways it breaks down is that there's a lot of AIs that sort of like feel like it's quaint to protect the creator, so they do. They work really hard to make it so that humanity can still exist and flourish. And there's a lot of AIs who are like, this is obnoxious, we just need to make them go away. I don't know how that's going to play out. Obviously, even in my books, I don't know how it's going to play out ultimately. Hopefully, the humans and the happy AIs can all live together in harmony and sing "Kumbaya" or something like that. But we are so far from that, right? We're in this phase where we've created AI, not real AI yet. We're still dealing with a precursor to real AI, and it's being ridiculously disruptive. But I guess, like, it's kind of funny. I've railed for a really long time against people calling what we have right now AI, because they're really LLMs, they're large language models. Um, we used to call them machine learning before that. Um, and they're not actually intelligent, but and so I would rail against, not wouldn't rail, I would just not call them AI myself. But I'm like, you know what? A lot of people treat them like they're intelligent, and maybe that's all that matters. The fact that people behave as though they think they're talking to a person, and people say, like, I'm going to ask chat, which sucks because chat was like becoming the first fourth person pronoun in the English language because of streamers talking to the people in their chat stream. They would say, like, hey chat, and they would say it in this fourth person scenario. And I was really excited because, like, English has never had a fourth person pronoun before, and it was so cool. And people were starting to use it like in common parlance. And now chat's been taken over to be a verb and a proper noun at the same time. It's terrible. Like people are using the word chat like we would use the word Google. Being like, I'm going to go chat that. It's like, oh no. Normally, I'm okay with language evolving and changing, but I like the evolution we were on the cusp of, not this new one. So I'm just going to lament that for a little while and gnash my teeth and dress in sackcloth and put ashes in my hair. This is what's going to have to happen. I'm going to have to deal with this because I can't change that. Anyway, that was a fun segue. But yeah, it is interesting though, because we don't even have real AI yet, right? We don't have AGI as either. AGI, well, it's interesting. I think people are using AGI in two different ways now. What it used to mean a general AI. So an AI that you could say, tie my shoes, do my math homework, formulate a business plan, do a bunch of medical research, and I don't know, go build a building, kind of thing. Like an AI that actually has the abilities to do anything like humans do, right? Like it knows enough things, and it has the skills and ability to both operate physically and work motor functions, interact with the world, and also hold detailed conversations and debates and stuff like that. And some people think that we're like on the cusp of AGI, but some like of this lead researchers in different AI firms are like, we have hit a wall, and our current way forward cannot give us AI. Some people use the word AGI to refer to agentic AI, and agentic AI means that you can just talk to it and verbally. Like Microsoft put out a post recently, I guess almost a year ago now, saying that Windows is going to become maybe it wasn't a year, it was in the fall, going to become an agentic OS where you just talk to your computer and it does things. And people are like, the fuck it is. Because, right, like, how obnoxious that be? You're like in the living room trying to do work, families all around you, and you've got to yip yap with your computer. Also, I type a lot faster than I talk. So why would I want that? And then have to talk back and forth. And you know how hard that is even on your phone. You're trying to tell Google to do something, to give you directions while you're driving, and someone in the back seat starts talking, and Google now driving you to like a random KFC like 4 states away or something like that. Like, it's not great. There's at least, I mean, like, maybe if agentic AIs were so good that they could tell that there's 2 conversations going on, and then home in on one conversation, and like realize, like, oh, these 3 words you said in the middle of this conversation, were you telling the other person to shut up? Like, we're so far away from that sort of thing. I feel like I just want the thing I really want. I want AI to actually do proper spell correction. Like, can we just get that contextual spell check? That would be fabulous. That actually works. Des says FAM has the same vibe as chat, but chat feels so much better. Yeah, I'm with you, because FAM has like this other meaning. It's a little bit more personal than chat, which is why I think that it would have trouble being a good fourth person pronoun. So I don't think we're on the cusp of agentic, or sorry, not, I mean, a general AI. But there are some experiments where they just take a whole pile of AIs and they chain them together, to do different things, and they've got like a manager AI. People are even doing that right now. They'll fire up a chat room for their AI. So all the AIs log into the chat room, and they have different tasks that they do. And then there's a manager AI that like its job is to follow up on all the other AIs to make sure things are actually happening and being done. It's shockingly impressive, and that sort of thing starts to like mimic the functionality of a general AI. So even if it's not like an AI that can do everything, it's like this mashup that actually is pretty wild, and that interests me a lot. And I start to wonder to myself, like, okay, so we really need to think about like what a post-work society looks like, and we are so not ready for that. But we're never going to be ready for that. We're only going to figure out how a post-work society works after it gets here and it fucks everything up. Hey, Christine, sorry. I'm glad you made it to a lunch with me as well. I'm talking AI now. I talked publishing and money in February at the beginning, and now I'm talking about AI and copyright and stuff like that. And I've actually veered off from copyright, just talking about like the future in AI. It's hard too, because like, as humans, we've always made better and better tools. And we've also always gate kept people who use the new tools. But this one is different. I will preface with that. This one is a different change than we ever had to do before. But there's like back when digital art came out and people would like draw on a tablet, art, like that's not real art. When book artists started doing composite images, or book covers started being made up of composite images, which many people use. That's the most common type of book cover, where an artist will take a whole bunch of separate images and composite them together into one image to make a book cover. They take a background and a couple of characters and a sword, and they grab a different hand that looks like it could hold the sword properly, and they jam all that together, and they colorize it and shade it, maybe paint over it a bit to make it look correct. That's composite art, and artists would say that's not real art because you didn't just draw the whole thing yourself. And now some composite artists will use some AI components in their composite art. They're like, I need a scroll that looks like this, but short of making one myself, I can't seem to find a picture of a scroll that looks like that. So they'll have AI generate said scroll and put that in. And people say that's not real art. So and the same thing for writers, right? When people start writing on typewriters, people are like, well, it's not a real book unless you write it by hand first. And then, heaven forbid, we started writing on computers. And then we got things like spell check. There are people that used to be like, if you can't actually spell the words yourself, then you shouldn't be a writer. Using spell check means you're not a real writer. And I remember how everything's spelled. That's a muscle that I do not flex enough anymore. I know how to get things close enough most of the time. Obviously I can spell most words. It's the unusual words I don't spell that much. Anything that has an I and an E, like, man, I don't know what comes first. I know a number of them, but if you give me a word that I don't spell very often, like the last name Pierce, apparently can be spelled either way, as it turns out. So anyway, we've always gate kept, and there's actually like interesting psychology behind that, because we create connections through suffering, like a bond of brotherhood. It's why we have things like hazing in fraternities and in the military and sports and stuff like that. The hazing is a thing that builds the connection. I'm not sure if someone's got a delivery for me. Just a second. Oh, hey, you can just leave that. Thank you. It's lunch for lunch with Matt. So hazing is how we sort of like, we trauma bond. Humans trauma bond. It's a thing we do a lot, and we view people who got to do the thing without the trauma as somehow cheating, right? They did it on some sort of easy mode. They didn't have to undergo the trauma that we went through. Therefore, it's not valid for them. And it's not a great thing to do, to be honest. Like, oh, you youngsters, you get electricity the easy way. You just like put a solar panel on your roof, or use the wind. you should go into the coal mine and mine coal like we had to, to get real electricity. Like it's obviously ridiculous, right? Like no one should have to go into the coal mine to mine coal to get electricity. That's terrible. We have better ways now. Um, but like there's that whole line of like scientists spent from Jurassic Park. Your scientists spend so much time wondering if they could do something. They never stop to think, should they do something? But the should is very hard to tell from current from now. Like what should we do? Like a couple of years ago, it was a reasonable argument to make to say that solar panel is too expensive, has too long a return, and is not something that we should do. But because we did solar and people started using it, we worked out better and better and better ways of doing solar. And now we have solar panels that are exceeding the theoretical maximum of what solar panels should be able to do. And we've only been doing solar panels large scale for a couple of decades. And we've now gone past what physics says silicon should be able to do. So pretty cool things can happen when we move forward, and it can be really hard to say, oh, well, you shouldn't do solar because the manufacturing process is too toxic. Well, of course, we fixed that. We did the next thing and the next thing. And I think now most reasonable humans agree that we should probably just do solar, like all the time. And people are like, well, where do you store the energy? And we've got some ways of doing it, like massive batteries, which are lakes, where during at nighttime when power generation demand is low, the water in the river doesn't slow down. So you take that energy and you use it to pump water up into a high lake. And in the daytime, when you need more water, you let the water come down. But they don't, it's not feasible just to have lakes everywhere that you pump water into. So people are like, well, what if you just make massive lithium-ion batteries? It's like, well, those are only good for about 5 years because of the number of discharge charge cycles that massive lithium-ion batteries have. And then you're like, then what do you do with them? You've got to have a recycling process. But now, because we fought against these problems and we're thinking about ways to move forward in the future, we're like on the cusp of having sodium batteries that are better than lithium-ion batteries, right? Sodium batteries. We got a lot of salt on Earth, and it's a lot easier to deal with than lithium, So I think about AI. I think about this current messy phase we're in right now. We're like, wow, like it's going to be the most disruptive technology that humanity has ever created. Like it's going to make the automobile look like a footnote, right? How disruptive AI is. Because everything else we've been doing up until now makes the work easier, makes us more productive, makes us able to do more with less. And we've inched toward the part where we just removed the us. But AI has the potential to just remove us from the equation. And thank you, Barbara. I appreciate that. I missed your comment. Barbara says, thanks for bringing up all the things that people use to villainize others. AI is far from the first. Yeah, it's true. I mean, you should have seen the things of the wagon lobby, the wagon makers posted about cars and the things they said when they started driving cars, not riding horses. And I'm like, that's something I say to people is like, do you want to be a wagon manufacturer or do you want to get into automotive manufacturing, right? Like, one of these things still exists. the other one does, but it's really bespoke. And I think it's actually one of the things to consider too, is that these really bespoke things, everything will continue to have a bespoke version, and sentiment will shift and ebb and flow over the years. We, in our lifespan, for most of us, are going to see AI sentiment ebb and flow. There's probably regulations and laws that are put in place, maybe in countries other than the United States first, that are going to like restrict what you can do with AI. EU is already talking about making it so that any product that contains AI, when it is sold, it must be flagged as such. And remember, when Amazon started saying, giving us these prompts saying you need to say whether or not AI was used for this particular thing, people are like, oh, well, they're just collecting that information. They're not going to use it anywhere. I'm like, if they're collecting it, they're going to use it. And sure enough, they are. And I knew right when I saw it, I'm like, this is corporate cover your ass. This is CYA. That's why they're doing it. That's why they're collecting. Yeah, sure, they're collecting this information so that when the government comes around and says, "Tell us what you've got that's built on AI," or a lawsuit comes around and says that they're gonna be able to tell you. So I kind of I knew that was going to happen. Um, I'm not going to give you ethical or moral advice on whether or not you should mark off if something was created with AI. It's so fuzzy too, because if you open up Google and type in a search message or a search query, you're going to get an AI response. Now you might close that and scroll down and click on a link, but boy, that information entered your brain, and it's now part of your decision-making process going forward. So, and it was you researching a thing for your book. Did you just use AI to write your book, right? Like you posted a question in a Reddit group. Well, Reddit uses AI to figure out what posts you should see, you know, or who's going to see your post. Did you use AI? It gets so squishy that it's something that's like it's messy. It's a disaster right now. We don't know how to navigate it. But I do feel like as an artist, I want to be making cars and not wagons. But I want to make wagons, I want to make cars that like are like the most premium wagon you've ever seen. Which is to say, like I'm all about like the handcrafted quality, but I also want to like stay in business. So I'm having to think to myself, like, what do I do to do this? One of the main areas I'm doing it right now is I'm using AIs to help me research my own books. I've got way too many books. And I've spent an exorbitant amount of money trying to use humans to create a Bible for my books and have failed. So AI is turning out to be a wonderful tool for researching my own books, for helping me like rewrite blurbs from books I wrote a decade ago and I don't remember the details of and stuff like that. And it is actually, I've had some really big whiffs, like fails, trying to use AI to help me get out of binds in a story. And I have some that are really good too. AI in many cases can sort of just work like a co-author. And I've done enough work with co-authors and like, well, for me, personally, the experience feels a lot like working with a co-author. So I'm not against that either. Catching up with the comments here. Dennis is just quoting Jurassic Park now. Yeah, Jill, you missed my talk. Oh, she's just popping in my office here. She was walking to the office, I think, during a bunch of that. Yeah, Jill says, I saw yesterday that someone said writing needs your blood, sweat, and tears as sacrifice, but I must challenge that with why. You know, why must suffer to create art or immersive content for readers to lose themselves in? I mean, I could make the same argument that like, hey, we used to have to hunt our food and kill an animal, you know, and now you just go to the supermarket and get your food. Like, what kind of eater are you? You're not a real eater because you're not eating something you killed yourself, or you're not eating food you grew yourself. Like, it's kind of, it's a strange argument to make that you have to bleed for things, or like, well, you didn't have to like, operate an auger on a farm, all your life and have to take off 3 of your fingers. So you're not like a real farmer because you got like that new equipment that's less likely to kill you or something like that. Like, no, it doesn't have to be bad. But I guess this part of the spiel is really just to sort of say that I think there's a middle ground in the whole AI thing. It is not a black and white situation. I think it's the first thing. And I think people that spew vitriol and say like, if you use any sort of AI, then you're evil and you're going to burn in hell, are, well, frankly, they're lying to themselves because they're using AI. I mean, to make a post like that on a meta platform, which is where you see them a lot, or on Twitter or any of them, is ridiculous, right? Because an AI is going to determine who sees your posts. An AI gave you the feedback that you got off of other people to make your posts. Like Facebook is one of the most egregious offenders in pirating authors' works, to train their AI. So it's patently ridiculous for people to do that, to make those statements on a platform where their very communication with other human beings is being facilitated by AI. But beyond that, there's many, many good things coming out of AI. There's like medical advances that use AI that are tremendous. There's cancer research that is being uses AI. That is amazing. There's AI. AI's ability to understand language is being used to help deaf and blind people operate better in the world. Um, and without that learning that they did, the same learning that allows someone to write a novel, that learning also helps, disabled people do better. So I'm like, you know what? If AI training on my books makes it so that one disabled person can have a higher quality of life, I'm all in. I've got more if you want to train them on more, right? Because someone's quality of life is definitely worth more than my books. Now, a counter argument to that would, of course, be that, like, well, now artists can't make a living. Um, but I think that art made by humans for humans is still important and will still have value. And it comes back around. This is almost by accident, but it is actually on purpose. It comes back around to agency. I think that as humans, we need to we do stories to share experiences and to share commonalities and to create connections with each other. And you need agency for the connection, right? A random occurrence does not create a connection. But if something is intentional and the creator had agency and thought about it and brought their own experiences into it and was able to put a bit of heart into it, that is the sort of thing that other humans will connect with. And on top of that, that doesn't mean that if part of the story is written by AI or AI slung a bunch of paragraphs on the page, you don't lose that. You know, um, just like CGI doesn't necessarily take away from a director and a writer's vision. You know, and they could use AI to do the lighting, do ray traced AI powered lighting in a movie, which they do. That doesn't take away from the vision of the creators to make a thing. And I think the same thing is true for books. If you choose to use AI to write your blurb, or you're writing romance and you cannot write another fucking sex scene, if your life depended on it, and you had said to chat, like, here's my book, here's my characters, can you write this damn sex scene? That's okay, because you still have the agency. You're still bringing your agency into the story. And that'd be no different than outsourcing that part of the story to someone else on Fiverr to write for you or something like that, as far as the story is concerned. So that's really my thought on that. That we're allowed to use tools to help us make things better and easier to avoid trauma. There are going to be tremendous unintended consequences and some intended consequences that are also negative coming out of AI. I think also a lot of good will come out of AI. I think that in the future, once we get over this messy phase, AI are going to make life for humans infinitely better than it is now. It's going to be pretty amazing. The biggest concern with AI right now, if I have a concern with AI right now, it's actually that a small select number of corporations control most of the AI. That's the thing we need to fight against. We should not be saying like AI is bad. We should be saying exclusive corporate control of AI is bad. And that's going to be a big fight for all of us to fight over the next couple of decades. The thing that I really would like to see is more more things available for regular folks to run AI in their house, run your own AI in your own house with your own training and stuff like that. And that, I think, is going to be something that is going to start to happen. It's going to be difficult at first, and it can be done right now, but it's difficult. But I think that'll be a big thing that will happen. We'll need to focus on. It might require all of us to become a little bit more savvy than we want to be. But like always, when innovation happens, the savvy people stick around, and the people that don't want to be savvy are usually the ones that get left behind, or just have their lives be a lot more difficult than they were before. And there's not really a great way around that. It's we humans generally march on towards finding more innovative solutions to deal with our problems. So yeah, I talk about the hope and the cool things that will come out of AI and how it will improve our future, but I'm always tempered with the fact that this is going to be really hard for a lot of us, and for some people in particular. So I want to be sensitive to the people that are struggling because of these changes, even if these changes are good. Good changes are not universally good for everyone. I want to be sensitive to that, but I also feel like people need to be sensitive to the fact that a lot of good things will come out of AI. If we wrest control of it from corporations to start with as much as we can, the average person will see their life improve as a result of AI. And perhaps we will move into a post-scarcity, post-work society, which requires us, by the way, to make tools like this. Like if you want the post-work, post-scarcity society where humans aren't just like killing each other to scratch a living out of this rock that we're on. If you want, Star Trek, gay space communism, which is what Star Trek is, I mean, not the gay part, but space communism, which is what Star Trek has always been. If you want that, if you want the Star Trek future, we need AI. If you want the Star Wars future, then we don't necessarily, or we have corporate control of AI. One of those two things happens. So I think that's something worth thinking about. Right? Like you think about it, right? You're like, man, fully automated space communism. Tell me about the downside. Tell me about the downside in a world where I can produce art and not have to worry about starving if no one likes my art as much as I do. Like that doesn't sound terrible. So yeah, that's kind of my thoughts there. And she also says scarcity mindset versus growth mindset. It is a fundamental to belief difference in that. Scarcity mindset tells you that there's only so much pie to go around, when as it turns out the pie is infinite. I mean, not in all scenarios, but the pie is close enough to being infinite, so as not to matter. So yeah, that's what we're gonna wrap it up here. I rambled. I'm gonna wrap it up at 45 past the hour, and I went long, and my food's out there getting cold, and I'm hungry, which we haven't solved and probably won't. So I will see you guys later. Have yourselves a fabulous day, a great weekend. Daylight savings is going to hit soon, first week of March in the US, and I believe last week of March in the EU. I'm going to keep Lunch with Mal at noon Eastern Standard Time in the US, Canada, and I think that's it. I don't think any part of South America is in Eastern Standard, or whatever they call it there. Obviously not Eastern Standard. So anyway, New York time as shorthand. New York time is when Lunch with Mal will happen. For me, it's going to become Brunch with Mal, because that means it's going to start happening at 10 o'clock in the morning. But for most everybody, it will stay at the same time, except probably a slight shift for people in Europe, because it's going to suddenly start happening an hour earlier for a couple of weeks, and then we'll be back at your regular time. The other 2 copyright points, I think I got through all the copyright points. I'm pretty sure I did, but I do have to go. I also have a call coming up, so I will see you guys next week. And please, drop a comment if there's certain thing I missed. I'll get back to it in the comments. I do have to run as well. So I'll talk to you fabulous folks later. Have yourselves a wonderful weekend. I hope the weather is wonderful where you are, and if you guys need rain, I hope you get rain. A lot of places need rain right now. So I'll talk to you later. Ciao.